I've been into enterprise software business for many years. Innovations and business development have been my routines for last years. And as of now, for already several years, my passion and my daily life on big part is the startup SigningServices, which is the simplest way to integrate trust for your compliant digital transactions. But okay, while Dmitry already shared, I would say, okay, there were some technical terms, but it was more still for understanding and picture of identities and authentication, authorization, and management. And then later on, Kate and Alexei will also be elaborating on more practical topics, and Alexander will share their real life experience. I would like to point out actual kind of situation, what's happening in Baltics in terms of usage and the legal environment when we talk about identities. But before I do that, in a few slides I'll introduce with ourselves. So SigningServices, we are a business line in the company Digital Mind. We've been helping many companies in the region, in Western Europe, in CIS countries to digitize their operations and automate business processes. With that experience, some years ago, we experienced that we saw the new challenges that were brought to the reality by digitalization. Appeared new terms like different identities and these new requirements for businesses to further digitize. They needed to understand how they can facilitate and use different identities to provide legally relevant evidence about transactions that they did digitally, and also issue data in a way that other parties can actually rely and trust in it. We soon realized that there are different levels and meanings, qualified, advanced, you probably also heard about that, achieved by different tools and methods across countries, regions, so the picture got quite colorful. Now, luckily for us, we were part of projects where companies, in order to achieve better user experience, information control, data privacy, and performance, continuity, etc., for different reasons, they chose the approach to integrate directly into their systems trust services. So we had the opportunity to be in dozens of projects to integrate, to develop, to investigate what it actually takes for a company to integrate trust services into their business. We packed this know-how and experience in the products called SigningServices, and now they are used by dozens of companies across Baltics and Poland in different industries. Frankly speaking, trust services are relevant for any and every single industry. Just of course the matter of right solution and the business requirements, how, on what extent and what realization should it go for. Right now, SigningServices are used in different use cases. First of all, to understand a variety of identities, then with those identities to conclude some digital transactions. Is it signing a document right in some system or confirming transactions such as financial transactions? Signing with different legal meanings and different signature types, also on touchscreen devices, and sealing data, validating. So there are a variety of use cases that we suddenly experienced once we made this trust services available for innovation for many. Like as a core thing that we offer is the API platform, which is, in a nutshell, it's a set of microservices and components that you can use to enhance your systems with trust services. With the years that we already been in the market, we have packed them already for under identities, for signing in specific systems like SharePoint or other, or having your own signing portal and signature collection functionalities, sealing and signing. So we have quite a few already to offer, and we'll talk today also about the specifically authentication topic. Why are we in this game? A few years ago, this wonderful lady, if you might notice already on the slide, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the president of European Commission, came out with a rather bold statement. I will not read it out, you can see it on the screen, but I will use my own words. Actually, also previous speaker Dmitry from EHETS already pointed to this. The idea is, if that it's a corporation or a company issuing you identity, you are not really in control of the data, how it's used, by whom, when, and how. Now, what Europe wants to achieve is to give control over data to its citizens. so that as a citizen, I have control over where I go and where I use my identity. But for that to work, European Commission is also offering, exposing, enforcing legal framework and also some technical parameters for that to work, so that also other stakeholders, such as private companies, will also rely on these identities and trust services. Also, previous speaker Dmitry mentioned about digital ID wallet. Yet another initiative how to achieve the situation that the goal by 2030 is to have around 80% of citizens of European countries to use either of the ID wallets. And meanwhile, all the public services followed by the private industries, banking, finance, and others are all available digitally. Under the same conditions, everybody can trust these identities. Meanwhile, users have control over those identities and their personal data. There is no exact data how many users in Europe are already using or having digital identity. There are some data about certain countries. We'll elaborate on that. But what I can definitely share, as of today, yesterday, there are 216 qualified trust service providers. Those are companies, private or government, or partly private, partly government owned, but those companies who have passed certain audits and certification to be eligible to issue identities that are then considered as, I refer to them, regulated identities or the real identities. What's interesting, when we started off nearly 5 years ago to specialize in this topic, back then the number of qualified trust service providers was nearly 3 times lower. So there is boom, rapid developments in the domain, and then it comes along. Of course, there are some opportunities and challenges with that. As of some time already, over half of European citizens using such identity can actually access public services also in other countries. So if you relocate to some other European country, you most probably will be eligible to access local public services. But now let's literally zoom into Baltics. In Baltics, basically we're talking about 4 types of methods: ID cards, Smart ID, Mobile ID, and e-Paraksts Mobile. Yes, Mobile ID logo is something that we all have been waiting for, so this is rather new, new also for us. And on the right-hand side, you can see the charts for each country. This represents thousands of certificates or accounts issued this golden color is actually color of the chip on your ID card. So those are certificates on ID card. The middle is a Smart ID, you probably guessed it by color. And the one on the right is, in Estonia and Lithuania case, Mobile ID, and in Latvia case, it's color orange, which stands for e-Paraksts Mobile, which is specific for Latvia. So if we take the whole 3 countries as one market, let's speak like that, we're talking about 6,152,000 approximately certificates. But please note, certificate does not represent a unique person. So I myself, I also have few certificates on different means. Meanwhile, number of issued ID cards does not represent that everybody is using them. That's probably for some obvious reasons, practical reasons to prepare your hardware and computer for that. But in many countries, ID card is already a mandatory document, and it's a matter of time when it will also have the identity certificate also with it. So the ID card then is usually your shortcut to use some mobile-friendly identity methods. One of them, Smart ID, the most popular one here in Baltics right now. We see the number in the charts, but keep in mind, a little bit over 80% are qualified accounts. What does that mean? You can use those accounts directly without going first to the bank in your digital channels. And secondly, you can use those also for qualified signing with qualified electronic signature. One shorty about user behavior. This is data from SKID Solutions about Smart ID and Mobile ID. There is no data about e-Paraksts Mobile or ID cards. But the main idea of this slide is to show to you that actually those users who use these tools, they use them rather actively. Once at least a day in Latvia, Smart ID is used by a user working day. But Lithuania, Estonia, those numbers, 2 or 3 times a month. No, 2 or 3 times a day, user uses either of such methods. So users are well familiar and like to use it or want to use it. Where to use it? We all knew these official regulated entities. They started off in the public services, quickly adopted to the financial services where you also can use them. And now we see these examples of other industries where the regulated entities are enforced, used. We can use any word of that, but they are not anymore limited to public or financial services. When the COVID came, in Latvia at least, you could not sell restricted goods, such as, for example, alcohol, unless you had validated the eligibility of the visitor. And you could do it only with these official regulated identities. A little bit zooming out, in Europe in general, Dmitry already mentioned the EIDAS regulation. So it gives a whole region, whole union, the same framework, legal foundation. But meanwhile, there are national EID strategies in each country. And there are some differences which originate from that. Therefore, there was this initiative again now of the EU ID wallets, to get back to standardized tools and approaches. Must admit is payments, directive PSD2, which enforces use of strong customer authentication, and these regulated entities usually already comply to that. So this was a great synergy how to foster adoption in society of the regulated entities. I mentioned already this access to restricted goods, but there are other examples. Services such as gambling cannot be done online unless the identity is checked. And also content. For example, you are traveling and you want to access content that is also only available in that country. To have access to it, you first need to provide evidence about your nationality, that you are, for example, from Latvia. These are just few use cases popping up, but the boldest one we've seen recently comes from Latvia. So here's the story. First of all, there are 2 laws that have actually new kind of version published. Number one, ID card is a mandatory document, and it's document number 1, starting from next year, January 1, 2023. Each of them have a, by default, qualified certificate. So if you don't want it, then you must speak up, but in general, it's there by default. So the number of certificates in ID card potentially will reach, everybody beyond 15 years. Then there was introduced definition of national methods, national e-identity methods. Currently, eID card and eParax mobile, we know Smart ID is working also to have this status. That would also allow or enforce government services to support Smart ID as well. Now, the juicy part. There is a law on electronic identification of natural persons in Latvia, which implies that also the commercial institutions must provide option for people to use their national e-identity method in the e-channel. So if you represent a company or branch of a company that sells goods or products or services online in Latvia and you are doing person identification, you must offer the possibility among whatever you use already now to choose either of the national e-identity methods. In fact, the law is already effective since December last year, but there is a period given till next year, 1st of February 2023, when this must be introduced. Why are we talking about this? This very example from Latvia brings back or links back to the first slide I used about Ursula von der Leyen statement. So in general, Europe is moving towards having the full coverage of sort of regulated identities, and there are different ways how that would be achieved. Financial sector synergy with these strong authentication methods, plus regulation, not only anymore to financial services, but also to other services, are also pushed. And this was a good example from Latvia. That in general, there will be a situation that each European citizen will have some sort of electronic identity that you as a business can rely on. So that gives you possibility to expand your digital business and reach new markets. There are signatures, seals, and different kind of possibilities to digitize with using also those identities. That again gives a new potential for you to innovate while being protected and compliant. So you leave that part, so to speak, to the identity providers and trust service issuers. And why are we talking about it? Because that's our core business, to help you to integrate that so you can focus on your biggest added value. I hope you got at least some good ideas and inspiration to further digitize your business, and maybe some innovation ideas, while I was sharing a little bit more where the identity domain is rolling, so to speak. And thank you for attention. Now it's time for some questions.